Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, How to Keep Yourself and Your Business Together in Challenging Times. My name is Anita Eliason, and I'm a Senior Business Advisor with the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center. And we're normally hosted by Samalat Hogan, who is our director, and we're having a few technical issues. So I would like to say that we're thrilled to have two people who are joining us from California today, but we're going to take some credit because Dr. Springer was educated at Harvard and Jim Wong at MIT. So we'd like to think that the state of Massachusetts had something to do with your beginnings, and we welcome you. We realize during these times that it is extremely important to keep ourselves together. We're asked to keep our businesses together, but in order to do that and to lead our team, we have to keep ourselves together. So today's conversation is going to focus on that. We are here today because of the support of the SBA, the University of Massachusetts Eisenberg School, the State of Economic Development in Massachusetts, and America's SBDC. We are part of a collaboration with other business advisors in our area, including the Community Development Corporation in Northampton, the Franklin County CDC, Common Capital, SCORE, the Center for Women in Enterprise, and our affiliates at Salem State and Clark University. We are also thrilled today to have the Executive Director of the New England Veterans Chamber of Commerce with us, Lisa Ducharme. So I would just like to say a little bit. Dr. Shauna Springer is a foremost expert in trauma and recovery, and is uniquely qualified to speak to the challenges that people are going through today and ways they can avoid the pitfalls of these challenging times. And Jim Wong is a Marine Corps veteran who has been a leader in many, many businesses himself, and is extensively working with businesses in California and throughout the country, helping them through these challenging times together. And Lisa Ducharme, welcome. Lisa is the Executive Director of the New England Veterans Chamber of Commerce. So welcome, welcome all.
Thank you, Anita.
So please tell us what you think leaders should do at this time, and what challenges are we looking to overcome?
Jim, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to just jump in?
Let me just open it up by saying that this is the 13th recession our country has seen since World War II. So we have gone through this multiple times, and we've come out at the other end better. There's no reason why we can't come out of COVID-19 better. Included as part of my talk, you've probably listened, those of you who are attending, you've probably listened to some of our other webinars, and I quoted quite a bit from McKinsey and Company. And one of the things they keep preaching, and rightly so, is we have to reimagine our organizations in order to improve their viability. And I want to say that before we can reimagine our companies, the organizations we belong to, we need to reimagine ourselves. And that's where Doc Springer comes in. And I call her Doc because in the Marine Corps, we call doctors who are special docs. And so, Doc Springer.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. You know how much that means to me. This is definitely a time of what maybe a warrior would call a kinetic environment, or a highly fluid environment with a lot of unknowns. But as Jim is saying, we've been through other situations like this before and come out the other side. And one of the things that I've come to appreciate that's been really fun for me in these conversations with warriors like Jim is that there's physical warfare and there's mental warfare. And it turns out that a lot of what we're dealing with right now is a form of mental warfare, is a form of trying to take all of these changes and bring some order to a chaotic situation so that we can lead ourselves and lead others through this time of unknowns. And it turns out that a lot of what works in physical warfare, in terms of knowing our identity and our value as a person and what we're moving with purpose to achieve, becomes critical as well in this sort of mental warfare.
Wow.
And I want to go ahead, Anita.
No, I was just going to say, we are very curious to know who is on the webinar today in terms of service. And so I'd like to just put up a real quick poll, and it's just got one question. And we would just like to know how many of you have served in the military. So if you would like to just fill that out real quickly, that will give us some perspective as we move forward. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, just laying some more groundwork. I'm going to quote from the Talmud, which is, we do not see things as they are. We see things as we are. So in times of high stress, we as human beings tend to lose our peripheral vision, meaning we start to get tunnel vision. In combat, that's actually very functional so that we can look ahead and look farther. So by coming together, what we have is the ability to look farther and wider. And that's the reason to collaborate. And we're going to talk about who belongs in your tribe and how do you leverage all the members. And it's more than just the people who work within your organization. So I'm going to ask Dr. Springer to expand on what does this term tribe mean and why is it so important, not only to veterans and military families, but to anyone who's in the civilian sector who's trying to run a business.
Yeah, thank you. I would say that Sebastian Junger, who wrote the book Tribe on Homecoming and Belonging, was the first person to really popularize the term tribe. So I'd want to, kind of mention that he played a role in really bringing this concept forward. Now, Sebastian, he defines it as the people that you would share the last of your food with. That's your tribe. So if you were running out of food, who would you turn to and share the last of your food with? And I like that definition, but I've also really kind of expanded a little bit based on my work with warriors to think about tribe as the people that you take your armor off with, the people that you show your real self to, and that you expect when you do, that they will step up and have your back, that they will step up and become people that align with you to move all together in the same direction. So when, Jim is talking about stress, creating tunnel vision, that is a total physiological thing. People that I work with, civilian veterans, describe this as, really this tunnel vision where you just don't see beyond what's right in front of your face, where you're always fixed on the threat that's right in front of you. But warriors train in groups of, if you're a Marine, fire teams are a group of 4 Marines that train together. And the way that they work together in war is the true genius of Marines. It's not the individual capacity of any one Marine. In fact, the Marine Rifle Squad manual says that an isolated Marine can be easily ambushed. So just like that, in business, when you can't see out your peripherals, you're vulnerable. It's in extending your tribe and aligning with people that you wouldn't naturally see as people you could team up with, that you really see much more of the game. And you get to zoom out and see different areas of potential and opportunities. And, Jim, as I've gotten to know you, you've really had a lot of great stories about how you've pulled from people that have had good ideas all up and down the ranks within your corporations and businesses. And I love to hear you share a story or two from how you've extended tribe to some folks that we wouldn't expect.
Thank you. Yeah, the story that comes to mind is my partners and I had decided to buy a Pizza Hut franchise in Brazil. Unfortunately, we didn't know that the currency was going to devalue in half the week that we took over. So very scary times. And right before we came in was a time of hyperinflation, where people were paid at 4 p.m. every day in cash so they could go out and buy food and other essentials before the prices went up. So pretty scary times. And so I hadn't learned to speak Portuguese, so I was speaking through my general manager who was interpreting. And I realized then that I really was stumped. I didn't know the country, didn't know the market. I knew that there were 6,500 pizzerias, and we only had 19. So Pizza Hut wanted us to spend money on advertising. We, by agreement, were required to spend 5% of our revenue on advertising. And TV is very expensive. Plus, if you advertise on TV, you're actually helping the other 6,500 pizzerias. So the hourly people that were in our meetings, since we were opening all the sessions to everyone. And a team of hourly people said, why don't we send large pizzas to disc jockeys? And the biggest spender we discover were the teenagers. They were on an allowance, the parents, and staying at home, so didn't have a lot of expenses, so they could spend all their allowance on discretionary purchases. And so they said, why don't we send large pizzas to disc jockeys that play their kind of music? And it worked marvelously. It didn't cost us anything, maybe $20 per pizza. Those are the things that people come up with when they're under stress. If you tap into their brains and don't lock yourself into a mindset that says only the bosses have the best ideas and people below have to take orders. If you do that, whether it's in Brazil or now in the US under COVID-19, you're going to cheat yourself out of some great, great ideas.
Yeah, there are always opportunities, even and maybe especially in adversity. And so you're talking about the business equivalent of a precision guided weapon, directing those large pizzas to the very demographic that would say, this is amazing. Thank you for the pizza. And it tastes so good. And, for the cost of, it just must have been pennies to the dollar in terms of the spend to get that kind of publicity. And that idea came from, the people at the peripherals that had that vision, right?
Well, everybody listens to their most popular disc jockeys, and these people, men and women who are broadcasting, would say, wow, this is a great pizza. And then, of course, on the top of the box, it would say where it came from. So it really hiked our sales. And that was only one of many instances where people would come in. So, in defining the tribe, if you expand the circle out, every layer you expand out, if you're willing to listen and to learn. In the military, we have fancy terms like improvise, adapt, and overcome. Really, it means punt.
No, it does.
Yeah.
When I think when I think of tribes, because I had never thought about tribes like this before, but as both of you are talking, when I think of tribes, I think of the people I know who are going to have my back. Because in the military, we've got the got your six because we've got your back. And I think if you work with all of your employees like Jim did and trusted them,
Yes,
that might be another way to look at it, as bringing your tribe to the full circle.
yeah, that's right. And part of it is destroying this myth of the sort of all-knowing, invulnerable leader, the CEO, you know, at the vanguard of the company, and really making yourself a real person. One of the things that I've learned in how I've evolved my practice from being a doctor, you know, I loved my time at Harvard and my time getting my PhD, but we do get socialized to think that we know quite a bit. And when you're in the trenches with somebody who has been in life or death situations, they might be younger, but they have a kind of life experience where you really have to step back and say, wait a second, what am I doing here? You know? And so what I've kind of come away with understanding is that trust outranks rank every day of the week. Trust outranks rank.
So
And
true.
yeah, if you can approach your relationships with those you lead, with those you partner with, as a way of building and holding that trust, they will become your tribe. That it just happens as a process.
Well, and many of you probably applied for the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and or for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, both of which are government programs that came out quickly. EIDL is very old. We've had that for many, many decades. Every time there's been a natural disaster, the EIDL comes into play. But part of the CARES Act also spawned the PPP, and many of you, I'm sure by now, have either applied or even received money. Well, a lot of you were frustrated because you had to do everything online. And if you got rejected, you didn't know, okay, how many other banks can I go to apply for PPP funding? And about that time, you wish you had your banker's cell phone number, don't you? So you never thought to include your banker as part of your tribe. Or some of you who have investors, you probably looked at those people as people you only need to communicate with occasionally. And investors are sometimes the toughest, but the best allies for you. They may some tough things that you don't want to hear, but these are tough times and you need that brutal honesty, like, have you considered buying another company? Like mergers and acquisitions. Right now, within the veteran community, 50% of the 2.5 million veteran-owned companies have owners who are 73 and above. And a lot of them, yeah, I know, it's huge, huge percentage. And a lot of them have said, okay, this is it. COVID-19, I think I'm ready to chalk it up. I'm looking for a successor. And so if you happen to be in a certain category where you can buy a company and inherit it from someone, there is so much money around. The Fed funds rate is currently at 0. Actually, officially, it's 0 to 0.25%. There's never been a time in recent years where there's been cheaper money. So money is everywhere. And so you need to know people who can direct you to where is that money? How come I don't know about this? Well, it's you're self-confined if you don't open your aperture, because those people are everywhere. Just need to tap into them. It's the 6 degrees of separation.
Glad to be joined by retired Chief Master Sergeant Charlie Duquette, Marine Corps, who surely knows.
Oh, no, he's only a Master Sergeant.
Oh,
no
okay.
Offense, Charlie, I love you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean
no,
to.
That's okay.
Didn't mean to demote you there. Still pretty good.
Yes, it's awesome.
Yeah,
he's a nice guy.
Yeah, but he's asking about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And I think it relates to something you were just saying, Jim, about the concept of finding those people that have your back by dissenting or making you push your thinking. You know, there's a concept in the Marine Corps of the red team and the blue team, and red teaming your thinking is really trying to come at your pattern of thought from a critical lens, and saying, what am I missing? What are the holes in my logic? What are the missed opportunities here? And so we can get into the practice of doing that for ourselves, but we can go to people that have wisdom, which is a different thing than knowledge. Knowledge is like the subject matter. You know, we can go and find those people. You can Google a lot of knowledge, but it's hard to Google wisdom. Wisdom comes from people that have lived experience, who have walked that valley or been through something similar, who say, you know, when I was in this situation, there was this opportunity that came to me because I was looking for opportunities where other people weren't. And so having those kind of people in your corner that can say, well, maybe don't play it safe right now. You know, I know that anxiety makes you want to play it safe and hold your cards close. Maybe now is the time to expand, or to scoop up some really great assets that you could hire people that are looking for positions. Or do you know who's available? People like me that used to go to conferences and flew around the country doing keynotes. I'm doing nothing but sitting in my house all day. So I've been like very receptive to lots of new relationships that have been really fun to develop that I never would have had the opportunity to develop before. Reading people's books finally, you know, doing all these things I couldn't do before. So really looking for the people that have wisdom to see the opportunities that may be just right there for all of us.
And I'm glad you brought up the blue team and red team. In the military, you know, those are games that we play during training so that you can be better in real life. And so if you're the blue team, then the red team's trying to annihilate you, literally. And so if they outthink you, outfox you, outmaneuver you, they're going to win. And you hope that you learn the lessons. Well, I remember being in Japan, meeting the head of Sony, the founder, Akio Morita. And at the time they were doing the Sony Walkman, because they discovered that the teenager, just like for pizza, the teenager had the most discretionary income. And so they started with my personal Walkman. And while the company was developing that and marketing it, there was a whole team, one floor above in their building, that was the red team trying to figure out how to kill the Walkman by out-inventing them. So these are the real lessons in life that we can embrace, and we should embrace, whether times are good or bad. In good times, management can get by with anything.
Yeah.
In tough times, you really find out what your mettle is.
Yeah.
And take that opportunity. It might be scary. You know, people tell me being a CEO is a lonely life. That is the biggest bullshit I've heard. It's only a lonely life if you don't talk to anybody on your team. And yes, I absolutely accept the fact that there are some decisions that you as the CEO have to make, but it doesn't have to be a lonely life. It can be a very collaborative experience. And so some of the younger companies have the office of the president or office of the CEO, so that power is not concentrated in one person, because you're only as good as you allow your mind to be. But if you allow other thoughts to come into your mind and you can process those, think about the advantage you have.
Can both of you talk about risk? Because what we see with a lot of small businesses is that, yes, there's money. I totally agree with you, Jim. There's a lot of money. There's also opportunity. What are steps people can take to put the risk in perspective? Because we haven't been in a situation exactly like this before. When your business is downturning, it is counterintuitive to think, I'll buy another business. How do people manage the risk?
Well, do
Yeah.
we see ourselves being in this for 5 years, for 10 years?
Okay.
Taking the long perspective on this can help us with the risk, because the natural thing to do, the thing that the body conspires to make us do, is to have this form of tunnel vision and to only see chronic threat, in front of us. And it's based on data. I mean, there's fear because of real reasons. But if we think about the long game, and we think about where can adversity be a ladder, and where can I take a small risk and see how it works, and develop a trust with my team. This actually relates, I think, Anita, to a question. I'm going to try and fold this question in. So somebody said, how do we develop and maintain trust in this climate of uncertainty and some poor decisions, especially with people with pre-existing trauma, currently developing trauma, et cetera? How can we develop a better experience for our tribe and our workforce? And so I think the two kind of come together when we think about the risk that we perceive and that others perceive is in some part a function of past traumas that may be unresolved, or that may be creating that fear in us again. And so one of the questions is, what does this remind me of that I've experienced before? What does this feeling remind me of that I've experienced before? How is it similar? And now, how is it different than what I've been through before? And I think as a leader, going through that process in a way where you are, as Jim says, not doing it as a lonely, invulnerable person that leads the helm, but in a truly brave way, in a way that shows people that we're trying to figure this stuff out ourselves, and we have a plan. We're not just in chaos. We have a plan, but we have the strength to turn to those that we trust and say, here's something I'm trying to work out. How do we as a team come together and move together into this space so that it's not just one person, sort of holding all of that fear, risk, uncertainty, and all of that, but it's a tribe that moves together. What do you think, Jim?
Well, you just made me think back to your comment about wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge can be gained in school. Typically, you drink from the fire hydrant, like many of us. When you're going to school, you cram that knowledge, you spit it back out to ace the exam. But when you gather your people around and you all share your knowledge, it's going to be different. That's when you start developing wisdom and intuition. I had the opportunity to study under quite a few Nobel laureates, and to a person, they were primarily right brain, so intuitive. That's where the big thoughts come from. So just as an example, when I was working for General Motors doing a turnaround, and we were trying to land a contract with Toyota. And so we had to study the Toyota production system. One question that I was asked as we were trying to qualify as a supplier is, what's your accounting system? And I remember saying, it's revenue minus cost equals profits. Well, that's knowledge. That's book smart. Intuition or wisdom is when you realize whenever there's an equal sign in the formula, you can flip things around. So the working formula is revenue minus targeted profits equals allowable cost. I live in Silicon Valley. Every up and coming company uses that formula because it gives you a lot more things to play with. And under COVID-19, we all need to adopt if we want to hold the targeted profit sacred, you can flex the revenue, or you can do more with less, meaning with the allowable cost. So it becomes fun when you have the whole team saying, oh, what the heck does that formula mean for us in terms of day-to-day behaviors? Then you're stretching yourself And when the whole team learns, guess what? The team's performance is better than any smartest CEO, CFO, COO, all those people would see before their name. The great ideas come from everywhere, bottom up, top to bottom, sideways, from your suppliers, from everybody who's outside your immediate circle.
That's so true. That's so true. And at some level, I think of genius, the flash of genius, as a kind of pattern recognition that synthesizes other people's good ideas and like sees where it all comes together. You know, when somebody gets a big idea, it's never just in isolation. It's often because they've been exposed to enough situations or people with wisdom and knowledge that they can kind of pull that in together. I got a nice question from JT. I'd love to answer it. Thank you, JT. It says, Shauna, please tell us about any books you have launched recently. Okay, there's two that I've launched recently. One of them was before the global pandemic. November 2019, I wrote a book called Beyond the Military, A Leader's Handbook for Warrior Reintegration with my friend Jason Roncaroni, a retired battalion commander from the 101st Airborne Division. And that book is about 400 pages. It's about the psychology of transition and transitional trauma. And then I wrote about 80 pages in there about how trauma and transition affects our closest relationships, with lots of good lessons actually for leadership as well. For example, one of the topics I've migrated from that book to leadership is why conflict is essential. You know, we're so avoidant of conflict, but we have to be able to have a good fight. How do you have a good fight with no animosity, but with vehement disagreement until you sharpen each other's minds through that conflict? And so you have to do it in your marriage, because if you want to evolve your marriage and not just sort of let it become, you know, autopilot, you have to have a good fight. And we have to have a good fight with our teams as leaders. The book I came out with more recently is called Warrior, How to Support Those Who Protect Us. And that book was written out of 10 years of walking with countless warriors in the valleys in their lives, and really understanding that the first story you hear from people is not the one you usually need to understand. It's kind of a red herring or a bit of a fake out. Usually when you're building trust, what you learn first is the test of trust. So are you trustworthy to walk with them through this valley? And it's really the story behind the story that we have to understand. And I think that also has lots of applications for walking through a time of trauma and understanding that people will front with the first story that's safer about how they're doing. And then when we get behind that, we find out about the hidden pain, but also the opportunity to support and serve them in ways that really hit target. So those are my two books. Thank you for asking. I really appreciate it.
And let me put another plug in for the Warrior book, because I've read it now twice. And it really syncs with me, even though I was in Vietnam, that's many, many years ago. I was a young man, but I carried with me a lot of moral injury because this country did not look at us favorably when we came back. And so Doc Shauna helped me think through, how do I turn that into energy that I can use? There's again, it's a trust factor that we're all carrying, and it's hard to describe in words sometimes what we feel. So I think these are all issues. I talked to the owner, a CEO, just a couple of days ago, who said that she applied for the PPP and her employees just actually got mad at her because they thought that they could apply for unemployment and get that $600 a month boost. So how does that make you feel as an owner when you're trying to take care of the troops, so to speak, and they actually are pissed off because they thought you did them wrong. Like, how do you deal with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So the idea is that if she had gotten the PPE, then they would make less or the same, but have to work for that money.
Yeah, see, this is where you have to know each individual on your team. I think that it's easy to label people, and right now Congress is trying to decide, should they continue the $600 supplement per month? What does that do to people? A lot of the people I talk to who are hoping to send their kids back to school is because that's the only decent meal their kids get during the day. So if you take those things into consideration and not make assignments, labels on people, then you get a totally different understanding of the world around us. And it's easy to jump to conclusions and say, oh, it's because they don't want to go to work. It's like, no, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question? When we talk about developing a tribe from our team members and people that we work with, a lot of people have asked me how they should reward people who have really stuck by them. The PPP issue that you bring up, Jim, is real. A lot of people are making more money at home with the PUA benefit than they would be if they were working. But there are also many businesses where people are just, you know, they're just full speed ahead. They've never closed a day, especially some of the restaurants. And people ask me, what is appropriate to do? Like, what have you found is a good thing to do for people? I understand hazard pay gets talked about a lot, but are there some other things that small business owners can do to reinforce the support that their team members have provided during this time?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
I think both Doc Shauna and I believe that you got to have a target for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a funny joke we used to tell in the Marine Corps. There's nothing that improves aim more than having a target. And during these times, it's not enough to have a short-term target because if you receive the PPP money, well, the basis for the PPP is 1 month's annual payroll times 2.5. It's not going to last you very long. What the government is hoping for is that during that time when you can retain your employees, your teammates, during that time you can reimagine the business so that you won't need additional government funding. I mean, that's the stimulation that we need to provide in the economy. And there are many categories of businesses that did very well. I mean, I have friends who own pizza joints who actually increased their revenue because they did a heck of a lot more takeout and delivery. So, but you know, did you buy enough boxes to have takeout and delivery? Those are things that when you get into the details, the people who take care of those details are the best people to come up with the innovative ideas. Right around where I live, one of these restaurants started giving away toilet paper along with the food. It's like, that's pretty ingenious.
That's the language of love in California.
I love that. Right? And if they're really good, they get paper towels as well, right?
Really hairy there for a while. We were doing like, the flushes, where it's like, okay. I think, one of the things that really made an impression on me in terms of the gold rush in California was that there were a lot of people that were thinking they were going to go strike it rich. But the people who really did well were the people who opened up stores that sold the pickaxes. and the
Yeah.
sleuths and the
Interesting.
things that everybody needed. So if, and that's not a decision that one would make from a state of chronic threat response where you've got tunnel vision. That is, it has all the tells of somebody with wisdom, pattern recognition, where is the opportunity, and a zoomed out perspective that says, what is the opportunity in this particular climate and this particular time?
Mhm.
And so that always kind of made an impression on me in terms of thinking through where we could move, you know, in this sort of an environment.
Yeah.
I also think that, you know, just to go back to the idea of this money, that there's a big difference between the people that take that money and they invest it in themselves in the sense of, okay, now I'm not working in my day job. Let me use that time to gain some new skills. So instead of taking the money, sitting in your foxhole, watching bad news, really using that opportunity to learn a new skill, take a new course. There's a lot of free courses right now, or ways that you can acquire new skills that will make you better at the job you're doing when the market opens up, or more adaptable in terms of where things are going to be moving to.
Great point.
Yeah, using as an opportunity rather than just as a temporary cessation of pressure.
Well,
I
as we look,
Oh, sorry, Jim. I always tell businesses that this is their time to be able to shine. This is their time to show that they're a subject matter expert. And they don't do that all the time. I mean, you know, everybody's worried about, oh, I need to get this camera, I need to do this lighting, I need to do this, and I need to do that. And the answer is really, in this environment, you don't have to, because we're willing at this point to take whatever it is. If you
are low.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they'll last forever because, you know, we don't know how long this is going to be. And JT had mentioned about recognitions and medals and kind words and thank you notes. And he even says that, you know, he had his thank you letter notarized so that people knew he was serious and of sound mind. And I think that's fascinating because I always tell my businesses that they have to focus on gratitude. Because gratitude is so important. We've got to fill the buckets with positive, with all the negative surrounding. If you don't fill the buckets with positive, the negatives are just going to keep building and layering and layering. And I think that that's kind of one of the most important things. And gratitude is so simple as long as it's honest. It's, you know, I would probably, if I gave somebody a thank you note, I would probably have to have it notarized as well because nobody would believe it was coming from me. But,
well, and I want to ask the audience a question. For those of you who received the PPP check, did you think to thank the bank? Did you write a thank you letter? Because a friend of mine actually took the effort to write a thank you letter, major bank, and he sent a copy to the chairman of the board and CEO of this multi-billion-dollar bank. And the chairman actually responded within a couple of days and said, we don't receive these thank you letters, but we're going to see what else we can do for you.
That's swimming upstream. That is like when everybody else is going in one direction, that's the opportunity, you know, to see what other people don't see.
Well, it's you know, back to what Lisa said about gratitude. It's a very strong emotion that ties people together, that knocks down barriers, that develops trust. Just say thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also, you know, in addition to gratitude and thanking people, I think letting them have a say in the direction of things is a way to show that they matter and that their opinions matter and that you've noticed that they're putting in the extra, you're going the extra mile, you know, you listen to their opinions and let them shape things a bit and then acknowledge them for what they've done. Instead of saying, oh, it's, you know, I'm happy to take the credit for everything that happened. Like, I'm very clear that my book Warrior is not about me. And just to make sure that I was clear, when I was having some issues asking for help to market it, because I don't like that part, I had a Marine friend of mine say, this isn't about you, it's about us. It's about the partnership that we have, the mutual respect, the way we've opened up to you, we've shared all of this information with you about our hidden pain. So, and he said this with so much love. He said, so Doc, I want you to build a bridge in your mind. Okay, do you see it there? Now get the fuck over it. And so, whoa, but that's exactly what I needed to hear. Sorry if I had to make you guys bleep something out. I don't know if this is gonna get me in trouble.
Oh, no, that's great.
I speak Harvard, where they say marvelous and, you know, all of that, and then fluent Marine now, which is it'll peel the paint off the walls, but that's how we talk to each other now, because it is a partnership. And so what I write about is not me. It's about all the warriors that have invested their wisdom in what I'm presenting, and I'm just packaging it and adding some stuff from the psychological side of things.
It's the best book I've read, and I think a lot of my peers would say the same thing. But we don't call a lot of people doc, so that is an affirmation. You know, I said in one of the webinars a few weeks ago, adopt Toyota's protocol of asking why 5 times, and you're going to get to the root causes of why you do things. What's the theory behind your business or to your life for that matter, and question those assumptions. During COVID-19, we all need to question the assumptions, because this is a totally different time. Even though this may be recession number 13 after World War II, each one is different. The closest one that I think we've had was the Asian flu, 1957 to 58. And you know what? A military doctor spotted the trend. It started in Hong Kong, and it spread to India, Europe, and to the US. And it killed 68,000 people in the US. But Dr. Maurice Hilleman at Bethesda Naval Research Institute had spotted the trend in Hong Kong. And so a bunch of military doctors figured it out that there was a connection to the Spanish flu, because there are a lot of survivors whose DNA, there were shifts of the DNA. And so he came up with the vaccine, and by going around the bureaucracy, because the World Health Organization, did not see the Asian flu until much later. And so Hilleman actually convinced a bunch of companies to start producing the vaccine. So by the time it hit our shores, we were ready.
Yeah.
So now these are the things that come out seemingly out of left field, but no, they don't. It's a group of people together trying to solve problems, asking why 5 times, so you get to the root of problems. Because if you can solve it at the 5th level, you're going to come up with something that's genius.
Yep. And you don't get wedded to the first idea that you come up with, but you persist. And there's a type of warriorship in that kind of moral courage, in that type of courage that says, I'm going to stand and do this thing, even though the powers that be tell me that, you know, they don't want to support it. I'm going to come up with this vaccine because of what I see. And to be able to persist in the face of those kind of odds, it's a type of warriorship that's available to business leaders, whether you've served or not in the military. I'm like not an asset in physical warfare, but being able to kind of persist on what I'm after is something that if I can do it, like anybody can do it. I think there's also, I wanted to make the point about good pain and bad pain, because there is a difference. So there's the kind of pain that's kind of like eating you alive from the inside out, that doesn't produce any wisdom. And then there's the kind of pain that Jim mentioned earlier that can be a powerful fuel for a life that's full of purpose. And so one of the points that we had is to understand that the ghosts of your fallen loved ones are a powerful source of wisdom and energy as you move forward with a meaningful life. A lot of people think about loss, whether it's a literal grief of losing someone who has fallen, or other types of loss, past failure, other things that we have to grieve, as kind of, saying goodbye and moving on with our lives. And it's not what healthy grieving is about. Healthy grieving is about reconnecting to what you have lost, and to taking what is good about that thing, what is instructive, what is, if there's a person, carrying that love forward with you, and living in honor of that person, and living in a way that would make that person proud, and living in a way that honors their legacy is a powerful way to move through life. And so that's good pain that can push us forward, as opposed to the kind of pain that leaves us suffering unproductively in our foxhole, not growing and not moving in a direction of what we value. And I know, Jim, that you have so many examples and stories of this as well.
Jim, can you give an example of businesses experiencing that pain? Because what you just talked about, Shauna, people are grieving what they had pre-COVID. They're grieving walking into their restaurant on the Saturday night and it being brimming with people who were laughing and having a wonderful time, and now it's takeout only. How do you grieve in real time? Because we're grieving while we're pivoting. How do you do that? What are tips to help people experience it, internalize it, and grow from it, but also get up every day?
Well, I think it is grief. I mean, I think the first thing is to label it appropriately and correctly and accurately, that it is grieving. All of these social contexts, the fabric, the incidental, serendipitous social contexts that we had before, going into a Starbucks and just saying hi to people, that we don't have a tight connection with, but they give our lives a rhythm. We suddenly, like someone threw the brakes on the life that we had. And so understanding that that is part of the trauma, is that we are grieving. And then finding a safe way and a safe place to fully reckon with that head on, and to not dodge it, but to take stock of what we've lost, and do that in a real way with people that we trust, and having those conversations about what has changed and what we've lost and what the impact has been, in really open and vulnerable ways, again, with those that we trust. And then coming up with a plan for what we can control, I think, is important. So, you might miss the incidental social context that you had with people as you walk through the community, you run into people in the supermarket, all of these things that just add like a delight to our day that we haven't had for months. But you could create that. If you knew that you were missing that was the thing you were grieving, you could proactively think, who haven't I talked to in 5 months that I would have run into, that I've just suddenly been cut off from? What would happen if I put a reminder in my phone to call one of those people that I haven't talked to in 5 months and say, how are you doing? Like, how has this whole experience been for you? And really drop into a conversation about how you're navigating the transitional trauma of suddenly losing the life and the structure that you were used to before, in concert with that other person. And then see how you feel afterwards. Because when you get off that phone call, what I know is that it does kind of process that grief and reconnect with that other person, is how we refuel ourselves to keep moving forward and holding hope that this won't always be the case. This in retrospect will be a part of our history. It's not going to be 10 years of this that any of us can imagine. What do you think, Jim?
Oh, well, wait, Jim, before you answer that, I just want you guys to know we only have a couple of minutes left. So Jim, after you answer that, I'd like to get the answers to the questions that we have in the chat and in the question and answer box. Okay. I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I want to talk about change planning and transformation. We're talking about a situation where we have to transform not only our organizations that we run, businesses that we run, but ourselves. And think of this journey as a rubber band that you're getting energy from. You don't get any energy until you stretch it. So there's an art to knowing how much do I stretch that rubber band. So we're all used to, as organizational leaders, to lead from the front, especially those of us who came out of the military. But when you're planning your transformation, start at the end. Now rally the people around you, have them describe what would be the ideal state. What are we trying to achieve, not just post-COVID-19, but 2 or 3 years later, and use that as the energy. So you're essentially stretching the rubber band. And it's the old people support what they help to create. That's where we get the energy.
Love that.
Yep, I totally agree. Well said. Did you want us to answer some of the questions about books? It looks like, Jim, they want some recommendations from us.
So, yeah, well, Carol had specifically asked the books in the articles on mental toughness. She asked that in the chat.
Okay.
So if we could get to that one, and then the other one about the psychology of transition work from homeless.
Okay. A couple of books that I would recommend on mental toughness. I think that Jim would agree with me because we've both cited the work of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes.
That's something
Absolutely.
we've both gravitated to.
Yeah.
Basically, if you can find meaning in that much of a traumatic context where the trauma is deep and ongoing, then it's possible to find meaning in any time of trauma and uncertainty.
And there's another book that both Doc Shauna and I are associated with, and it's The Art of Possibility, written by Ben Zander, who's the maestro at the Boston Philharmonic, and his wife, Rosamund Zander.
Yep. So
we both worked with, I worked with Ben, and Doc Shauna worked with his wife. That is a great book, especially when they talk about rule number 6. And rule number 6, there's only one rule. There's no 1 to 5. So rule number 6 is don't take yourself so goddamn seriously.
I love it.
There's no evidence that life was meant to be taken seriously all the time. Another one that I would recommend is The Upside by Jim Rundin. It has a lot of powerful stories and profiles of some people that I've been blessed to know. And so that would be kind of a third one that I'd recommend. Let's see, does the psychology of transition work for homeless people who are not past military? I'm not sure I understand the question. I'll take a stab at it. But if you want to add more into the chat, Marilyn, I might be a little bit more on target. I think that people are often fond of saying trauma is trauma is trauma, and they mean it kindly, but I don't find that to be true. I find that there are different kinds of trauma, and so some kinds of trauma are actually a little bit easier to get to than others. If a trauma, for example, is the reason why somebody has kind of become derailed from meaningful social contact or become homeless or, really become under-resourced. If it's because of a shame-based trauma, then it may be a little bit more of a complicated recovery journey than other types of trauma. So as hard as, a combat trauma is, for example, there's not a lot of shame in that. In fact, it's actually a sign of valor to have been in combat. So sometimes I think we assume that that's the trauma that people are facing when they come in, and it may not be. It may have been, even for males, it may have been a sexual assault. It may have been, some other story. So in the sense that the higher order calling of healers is to build trust so you can get the story behind the story that blocks growth. I think it's absolutely the same. And then it's just a matter of finding out who you are sitting with. What is that individual person? What is that need that they have? What are those individual barriers and blocks that have created the situation that they find themselves in? And then how can we help that person reattach to hope, to connect with others? Because when we connect, we survive. And then how we can help them move towards a path of healing.
Oh. This has just been amazing. And to quote Viktor Frankl, he says how important it is to have a redemptive perspective on our suffering. And I think that that's what you've both been saying, that this has got to be translated into something that's going to make us more on the other end of this, not less. Do you have any parting words for us, Jim and Dr. Shauna?
Jim, go ahead and take that one first.
Well, I want to quote from Viktor Frankl, because I quote from him all the time.
Oh, what was the book? What was the name of the book from him?
I'm doing it. Oh, Man's Search for Meaning. I'm putting it in the chat right now.
Thank you.
You bet.
The quote I like to use from Viktor Frankl, who is a psychiatrist and fairly old when he got into the concentration camp. And so he was writing this book in his head while he was going through the suffering. And the paragraph, the phrase I like to use is, he said, it's a peculiarity of man that he can live only by looking to the future, and that is his salvation.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah, that's good. I don't know if I want to even try and top that, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to say that anytime I get to do this with you, Jim, is a guaranteed good time. So I had a lot of fun, and I really appreciated this opportunity.
And this is for those of you who are listening, you can connect with us. You have our contact information. You don't have to be a veteran or a military spouse. Just connect with us, because we're here so that we can learn from you and you can learn from us. So, you connect with us.
We'll make sure that when we send out the thank you email, we'll make sure that we put your information in the email so that they have it.
That's wonderful. Lisa Ducharme, Dr. Shauna Springer, and Jim Wong, thank you so much. We have been blessed by this experience, and please stay well. We'll see you again. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.